Vi på OBF, Oslo Business Forum, den største og viktigste konferansen innenfor norsk næringsliv.
The energy of conferences like OBF is the greatest thing.
Hvert år så henter de i noen av verdens mest ledende tenkere fra på sin scene.
When I started 50 years ago as an entrepreneur, the word entrepreneur I don't think existed.
What is the purpose of business?
Business used to follow norms.
Is not to maximize shareholder value. Whoever told you that should them.
If there's one thing history has taught us, it's that it's very difficult to predict the future.
Og de her for å heve kompetansen og inspirere og motivere norsk næringsliv. Og vi skal få snakke med Anssi Rantanen. Anssi finsk, derfor denne episoden på engelsk. Og Anssi en keynote speaker på OBF.
Our next keynote comes from the winner of the speaker contest.
Anssi Rantanen.
Han CEO i MySpeaker Growth og har førstehåndskunnskap om påvirkning av AI på organisasjoner.
Did you know that 52% of Fortune 500 companies have disappeared since the year 2000 because of digital disruption?
Han en ledende stemme innenfor AI, men også innenfor growth mindset, psykologisk trygghet, teamarbeid og eksperimentering. Vi skal snakke om AI og mennesker. Hvordan kan vi bruke AI i våre virksomheter, og hvorfor menneskene så viktig? Hvorfor synes noen det enklere å bruke nye verktøy, mens andre synes det mer krevende? Før vi slipper Anssi til, så vil jeg minne om livepodden vår. Dette faktisk vår 99. episode, og det betyr at bare om noen få uker, altså den 18. oktober kl. 16, så skal vi feire 100 episoder, og vi vil gjøre det med deg. Det noen få plasser igjen, så gå inn på smidigpodden.no/100 for å sikre deg en plass. Jeg vil også takke Smidigpodden fellesskapet for at dere støtter oss og liker det vi gjør. Vi verdsetter hver eneste en av dere og utrolig stolte over at dere ønsker å være med oss. Og dersom du liker det du hører, så kan du så klart gå inn på smidigpodden.no/en-kaffe og bli en medlem av fellesskapet vårt. Men vi setter også enormt stor pris på om du gir oss en review, en like, en share eller abonnerer på den plattformen du hører Smidigpodden på. Dette utrolig fint for Smidigpodden sitt mål om å nå til enda flere mennesker med kunnskap og inspirasjon. Til sist vil jeg takke våre partnere som gjør Smidigpodden mulig. Våre hovedpartnere, Capra og Sparebank1 Utvikling, og vår partner. Og nå, over til Anssi.
I haven't been to Oslo Business Forum before. I've been to Oslo many times, and I love Oslo, so I was super happy to get invited here. I spoke at Nordic Business Forum a couple of years ago, so the Finnish like equivalent.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We listened to that talk, so I think
Nice.
that's something we want to touch into, because the key takeaway for me was that I heard it now, and now for me it's kind of makes a lot of sense, because but you did it like 4 years ago or something?
4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
And that's, for me, is kind of mind-blowing, because it's a lot of these things have happened right now or the last year or so, but you were so early.
Well, there's a great saying that I really like from Silicon Valley, that the future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. So what that basically means is that, like, the most futuristic technologies that you could imagine, like, pretty much already exist, but they just haven't been distributed widely yet. So again, like 4 years ago, I was able to create the brand, the website, the chatbot in 5 minutes. Like, that's already been around for like 7 or 8 years. Of course, now with generative AI, it's being like really supercharged. And I think the capabilities of the tools are just way more powerful than what they used to be. But yeah, it's as timely now as it was 4 years ago. Maybe more timely now than when it was. Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about how you kind of slided in that kind of area, and a little bit about your background, how you kind of ended up? Because I think it's, as I said, I think you were an early adapter.
Sure.
And it's maybe not that, because I think nowadays most people know about it, have heard about it, but back then it wasn't like that. So how did that happen?
So, the way that I would maybe summarize it is that I've always been really interested in finding out ways that have a very big impact with very little input. So I don't know if you guys have, read like Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week, but, I was really influenced by that kind of work, 7-8 years ago. One element that he talks about is the 80-20 principle. So what are the Pareto principle? Like, what are small things that can have a disproportionately large impact? Some might call it like hacks or like growth hacking. That was something that was talked about a lot at one point and still is to some extent. But like that theme has been something that I've always been really interested in. Like, what are things that can be done that don't necessarily take a lot of time or energy, but can have a huge impact, right? And of course, leveraging technology, like that is the ultimate sort of tool to generate more impact than like what you can do just like linearly, right? But yeah, like I studied economics. I worked at Google for a couple of years, and now I've been an entrepreneur for 5 years. But like really, that's for some reason like my natural curiosity has always been towards those kinds of things. So that's maybe how I would summarize it. And again, like I'm more maybe interested in like the universal principles and the common sort of denominators, as opposed to like, hey, try this tool and this hack, like this is great. Like I'm more interested in like the philosophy that underpins it, right? Which is again like this sort of like 80-20 thinking, etc. So yeah, a bit of a meandering answer, but maybe you got something from it.
So this is really interesting because when you talk about all this, you remind me of Tobias a lot.
Yeah,
this is what he talks about. This is what he does.
Yeah.
Like he makes our lives better that way. I'm not like that. It's not like I'm not interested, but it doesn't come natural to me.
Sure.
And so in a way, I'm thinking like you are like one kind of like sort of organizations that are very like innate in using this technology, thinking like this.
Yeah.
And then you have the other kind of organizations that they're not opposed to it. We just don't think that way right now. What do you think is like the differentiator between them? How can that organization kind of bridge the gap?
So like what I would actually say is that like I'm not the person that is like, I don't generate a lot of new ideas. Like what I do is I just read a lot and follow, right? So I'm not a generator of ideas. I'm more just like naturally curious and read and see what other things do, what other people do, etc. And I just sort of steal from them. Like that's the way I sort of think about it, right? And again, like if an organization isn't maybe naturally, you know, a generator of these kinds of things, you know, I'm guaranteed there's some subset of people within that organization that are curious and that are looking at other organizations, what they're doing differently, et cetera. So the best, like, I think, framework for change comes from I think it's called Geoffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm. It's actually originally a framework for how technologies like permeate society, so that, you know, for any company, you'll have your target customers, innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So you can divide it into 5 subsegments. But I think any organization, any group of people, you can divide into those subsegments as well. So that means if you have 1,000 people in your organization, 16% will be early, like innovators and early adopters. And what organizations often try to do when they try to lead change is, of course, get the majority of the people to change their behavior, but that's the wrong strategy. What you want to do is focus on the innovators and the early adopters, give them the sort of mandate, give them the freedom, give them the space, the resources to try to do things differently, work differently, you leverage technology or work in agile ways or whatever it is, and then try to get like success stories from that and do it like in an experiment-driven way, like let's try this for 3 months, see if it works and it doesn't work. And then once the rest of the organization, the early majority and late majority, once they see that it's first of all possible to do something, then they'll be more open-minded to follow suit, right? So yeah, organizational change is like, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, 60% of organizational transformations fail. And there's no like simple answer as to why that is, but I'm a big believer in a couple of frameworks. Crossing the Chasm is a good framework. And then there's also Kotter's 8 Steps to Change, which I think is another really good organizational change framework.
I prefer Adkar. Have you heard about it?
Sorry?
Adkar, have you heard about it?
I've heard about it, but I'm not very familiar with it. Yeah.
It's an alternative to Kotter, but it's not that much steps. It's
Sure.
It's not iterative, but you can use it a bit more iteratively.
Sure.
So I think it's a very good tool as well.
But there's many ways to skin a cat, like, and I think that's like there's no right or wrong answers. Like there's really no right or wrong answers, and I never tell anybody that this is what you should be. Like you need to figure it out for yourself, and every company is different context, etc. So that's the exciting part about it, but that's also the challenging part about it. Like there are no silver bullets. But we as humans, we love to want to simplify things. We want silver bullets. We want simple answers, do this and you'll get this outcome. But humans are incredibly complex. Organizations are super complex. So it doesn't work that linearly, and that's just something that we have to accept.
But then you have this, but then I buy your argument even more about the, investing in the early adapters and the people that want to experiment. Like, let them play,
for sure.
Let them do things, experiment, let them fail, let them succeed, and then everyone else can kind of follow suit when they've figured out kind of what it works.
For sure, yeah.
I would like to go back to you spoke about like you're not a linear thinker. You decouple input, output, and outcome.
Sure.
And I think that's something we speak about a lot. And I think that's I would say that's maybe one of the biggest problems in many companies.
Yeah.
That they think that if they do the work, they will get a lot of things done, and they will have the effects of that. But that's seldom true. And so that's I was thinking how, because I think that's the clue. Do you have any advice for companies or people working in companies that have a very linear thinking and how to kind of get out of that mindset, I would call it?
Yeah. I mean, so read the Checklist Manifesto. Like that's a great book on like systems and thinking in systems, and it's written by a surgeon called Atul Gawande, who basically he implemented a checklist in surgery rooms in the United States. And the checklist takes 2 minutes to run through at the beginning of every surgery, right? So it's like a very small intervention, but it reduced, I think, like major complications by 60% and accidental deaths by 24%. So again, super simple intervention, massive outcome, right?
Yes.
And that's like a system level improvement where basically you're looking at the system, you're zooming out, looking at the system and trying to first of all, of course, understand like root causes. Like, okay, what is the root cause of mistakes happen in surgeries? Well, the team doesn't know each other. There's a very hierarchical culture. There's not, transparent communication. Okay, let's try to intervene with a simple sort of checklist. And it's a great book. Like the Checklist Manifesto is a great book. And then there's another really good book called Upstream by Chip and Dan Heath. Again, fantastic book about systems thinking, because I think like that is really the key on how small interventions can have a really big impact on like the system, like the outcomes of the system. So get acquainted with systems thinking. Like those are two really good books that I recommend. Or that's at least what I would come to mind. I mean, we could talk about this for like an hour, but like the short answer is like, check out those resources.
Awesome. Yeah. I think it's, at least today, there's a lot of hype in the AI space.
100%.
And there's also some strong voices that we need to slow down. We need to think really about what we are going.
Yeah.
What's your take on all this discussion?
Yeah.
What do you think we should do?
I think it's great that there's discussion.
Yeah.
So again, like I look at it from a high level systems point of view.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic that there's a lot of people that are critical and there's a lot of people that are very bullish, right? Like that is why governments usually work, is that you have the governing party and then you have the opposition party, right? There's checks and balances. So on a high level, I think it's super good that there are like opposition forces discussing this. Generative AI is right now, according to the Gartner hype cycle, at peak hype. So there's like a lot of promises being made, some of which might or might not be fulfilled in the short or long term. But I think they are, phenomenal technologies. Tomorrow I'll be mentioning like 3 or 4 case studies that like show how they can have a massive effect on like productivity and top line and bottom line. So I think it's definitely something to be experimented with. But like, I read both sides of the argument. Like, I think reading, so on the pro side, I think Mark Andreessen came out with a phenomenal essay like a month ago. I think it's called Why AI Will Save the World. Great essay. But then also I read a lot and listen to a lot of stuff by Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's probably one of the more vocal sort of opposition party members. And I think it's great. Like I'm personally agnostic as to whether it's going to kill us or whether it's going to save us. Time will tell. But like I'm quite. I would say that I'm a realist. I like to understand, like, from a data perspective as well, like, what are the impacts that it already has? And there's a lot of positive impacts that it already has in many different parts of organizations and society, etc. So, yeah, like, I'm personally, I try to be as non-religious about everything as possible. And the interesting thing is that I think both sides here are, like, almost religious in their point of view.
Yeah, and that's what normally happens, I would say, in any discussion.
And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it's a good thing. I think there's a good thing that there's a lot of discussion, like for and against. Yeah.
So I think it's when you say whether it's going to kill us or not,
Yeah.
it makes me think about this. It's a tweet that I read years ago, and I still remember it today. And it said, someone tweeted, just a normal person tweeted, I don't know what everyone's so worried about. If the robots take over, we can just throw water at them. And Elon Musk answered, "You're so right."
Yeah.
That's what I think about. But
Yeah.
But what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of talk about as well, like, oh, it should be okay to use AI for this or not this. Like, for example, the typical example is like in schools, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts about that?
That is a really interesting and challenging topic. I do think that, like, there's a good quote from Andy Grove, you know, the founder of Intel. He was asked, like, many decades ago, like, is the chip, like, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, right? And he said that, well, like, it's a silly question. Like, the chip is like steel. Like, it just is a thing. It's up to us to decide whether we make it a good thing or a bad thing. It's like a hammer, like you can build a house with it or then you can kill someone with it. It's a tool, right? But of course, the counter argument is that, you know, AI, and especially if we someday get to something even close to AGI, artificial general intelligence, that they will have powers and knowledge so powerful that this is like a technology unlike any other. I don't know. Like, I really don't know what the long-term future is going to be like. But I'm more interested on the short term. And I think on the short term, you know, there's been discussion about like banning AI or like slowing the progress of AI. And you know, one Silicon Valley technologist, Ben Horowitz, said that you can't ban AI. It's mathematics. Like it's math. And you can't ban math. How are you going to ban math? Like, it's already out there. Like, you're not going to be able to ban. Like, what are you going to do? Like, ban math?
You can't take it back.
You can't take it back.
No.
Like, the genie's out of the box, right? So, again, like, then we can think from, like, I don't know, semi-first principles, like, these technologies are sort of here to stay. You can't put the genie back in the box. So then, like, if we assume that tools like ChatGPT are going to be available to everybody, like, do you want to ban them from school, or do you want to be a professor that teaches your students how to use them and leverage them to do maybe better work, right? And there's a lot of interesting studies, or not studies, but like case studies. You know, a couple of professors at like Stanford, they're just like telling their students, yeah, like, I want you to work out these problems and you have to use ChatGPT. Like, you have to use DALL-E, you have to use Midjourney, like, you're not allowed to do this assignment without using these tools. And again, I think personally, in the short term, that's the more right approach, because the genie's out of the bottle. Like, you're not going to be able to put it back, right?
Yeah, and it's a good thing as well. Like, if you don't learn it early, then you're going to be a lagger.
For sure.
You're going to fall behind.
Yeah. I mean,
because everyone else is going to use it.
We had calculator. I had a graphic calculator in school, and it was very helpful to solve certain equations. Like, these are just, you know, they work with a bit of a different kind of structure. Like, but they're just like very sophisticated calculators. do you want your kids not to use calculators?
But it's
But
interesting.
my math teacher, he had a very good kind of approach to it. He said that if you want to just be approved, you're at the lowest grade.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter for me if you do it like this or this.
Sure.
But if you want to have the highest grade,
Yeah.
you have to show me that you can do it with all the tools that you have.
Yeah.
So that's kind of his approach. His way of going forward on it. And I think that's, for me, that was very, it kind of hit me very well, and and I think that's a good way to look at it. It's a tool, and it's good if you know how to use it, and then you can choose if it's a good fit or not, and you want to combine it with other tools.
And I also think like what we should teach people to do is we should teach people how to think, how to problem solve, not how to get to the right answer. Like that's not the point of school, in my opinion. I was never great at school because I didn't really have a lot of teachers that taught me how to think. I just learned how to give the right answer, and
Same here.
and I've learned the foundations of math. I've learned them in the past 5 years, because when I was in school, I didn't have a good engaging teacher that taught me the logic and the philosophy and the foundations of numbers and how math works. I think that's what we should be teaching, right? More like the universal principles that underpin, the sciences, for example, or human science or whatever it is, as opposed to just how to get to the right answer. So yeah, I think education is in for, a revolution in education is long overdue, but I think we'll see how and when it arrives, because the education system isn't very quick to adapt. So we'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've spoken a lot about that with regards to our son, that this will be our responsibility in his upbringing to make sure that he gets this mindset.
Yeah. And I think I'm right now reading Elon Musk's book written by Walter Isaacson, and you can have a lot of opinions on Elon Musk. It's a fascinating book. I think one of the things that he is exceptionally good at is he just challenges people to question why are we doing this? From a very foundational, fundamental reason, why are we doing this the way that we're doing it? There might be a much better way to do it that takes 90% less time, and often he helps people find those solutions, which just we've been doing this because we've always been doing it like this, but it might not be the right way to do it. So let's just question a lot of the assumptions that we have. And again, that's a fantastic skill. If we would teach kids to question assumptions, fantastic.
But that's something you often say to kids: don't question me, or don't ask so much questions, just do what I tell you to do. So we're doing the wrong way all the time.
Yeah, and again, look, he's a super complex person. It's a fascinating book, but but I think that one big takeaway that I took away from the book is just really question assumptions.
But we talk about that a lot in the podcast. But I think that the problem is with people, when they say that could we do it in a different way?
Yeah,
they kind of think that then I'm doing it wrong. But that's not the case.
Exactly.
You can do it in a good way, but there could be a better way anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Or things could have changed.
Yeah.
So that's why now the old way could still be good, but there is a better way because things have changed.
Exactly.
And I think that's important to kind of get your head around that, because it doesn't mean that the things you have done for all the years has been wrong,
for sure,
or you're stupid or anything.
Exactly.
It does just mean that it could be a better way.
100%. Yeah. And I think the meta skill there is the sort of growth mindset, from Carol Dweck, where you get super excited if you find out that you could have done something differently or you could have done something better, because great, this is an opportunity to learn, right? Fantastic, I'm learning, I'm growing, right? But it's super difficult because, of course, we as humans were hardwired to, avoid uncomfortable emotions. So, yeah.
And I think we also learn in school from a very little, there's one way to do it.
Yeah,
and then
100%.
you'll get the right answer.
You get the right answer or wrong answer. Yeah.
And then you hand in your test, you get it back as wrong.
Yeah.
So you kind of you have that mentality from you're little.
Yeah.
And it comes with you to work when you start your professional life.
Yeah.
It just kind of spreads.
Yeah. 100%. And again, Yeah, I think like a fascinating, area. I studied at one point like the decision making of poker players, and it's really interesting because they're professional decision makers, right? Like all they do is decisions,
Fascinating,
right?
yeah.
And they, like the best poker players, like what they do is that they completely like disassociate like decision making process versus outcome, right? So they don't care about the outcome at all. Like of course they do, it's nice to win, but what they want to optimize for is the right decision making process. Yeah. Basically. So an example of this is Magnus Carlsen, the chess player. He won a tournament, I think it was like last year or the year before. And, they asked him like, are you happy that you won? And he was like, no, like I'm super pissed off. Because I was making bad decisions. Yes. Like I won by luck.
Remember that, yeah.
Right? And I think, again, school teaches you to focus on the outcomes. Yeah. Whereas what I think we should be teaching and focusing on is like the decision making, the thinking, right? Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but like F the outcomes, right? Like let's
you can
focus,
swear. It's,
like, let's focus on the decision-making process and like the input and the quality of the thinking, as opposed to the results. Yeah. And it's hard because of course results. Results are. They're embedded into everything. Yeah. Like it's your quarterly bonuses based on results and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. And again, these are like almost like quite philosophical things, but I think it's I think they're important things to discuss. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that tomorrow you will speak about some success business cases.
Yeah.
I would. Could you please share a little bit of them? Because that sounds really interesting to see. Because I believe it's a lot of hype. Yeah. And there's maybe not that many concrete cases. At least accessible for people.
Yeah. For example, Boston Consulting Group, they gave a subset of their consultants GPT-4 to work with as a co-pilot, and they were able to do 12% more projects. They were able to do 25% faster tasks, and the quality of their work increased by 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Like that's insane.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a case study, and BCG have published a paper on it and stuff, so it's widely available. Another example is JetBlue. It's an airline company. They launched a GPT-powered customer service chat tool, which can answer 60,000 questions, and they're estimating that it's saving 73,000 hours per quarter of customer service agent time. Which means that the customer service agents can work longer with the more complex customer stories, right? And again, if you just, assume, say, 30 euros per hour, then that's like almost a 10 million euro saving annually. So a pretty big impact, right? GitHub Copilot came out with a study. Of course, they came out with a study, so they were looking for good results, but they showed that developers were able to increase their output by 2.1x, so they were over 2x more productive using GitHub Copilot, right? So, yeah, like there's a lot of pretty impressive things that we can already see with these tools. Like even today, like even in the short term. Yeah.
Cool.
Fascinating.
I think we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been, thank you so much for seeing us here. And
my pleasure.
It was great.
Yeah, super fun. Thanks for inviting me. And we could talk about all of this for so much longer, but thanks for having me on, and it's been a super interesting conversation.
And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we are recording this podcast with Nemono's sound capsule.